Now, as the name of the video implies, this is part 10 of a story, and if you haven't seen the previous parts, this one likely won't make any sense to you. So I'd highly recommend starting at part 1, and if you like it, working your way back here. Links to all previous parts will be in the description below. And now, without further ado, let's get back to the story. Once again, we find ourselves on a lush blue and green world, in the middle of a forest, where the father, mother, and daughter stand at the base of a massive stone tower, with no visible entrances, looking up at it with awe upon their faces. The mother then asks, "Who do you think built it?" The father gives a shrug, not taking his eyes off it as he says, "Master never mentioned anything like this, and I was always under the impression no one else lived here, or ever had." He then glances at his daughter, smiles at her faintly and says, "Yet he was the one who directed us here, apparently. Makes me wonder what else he never told me about." There is then a long moment of silence before the mother asks, "What really happened that night he disappeared? The night my sickness was cured?" The father shuts his eyes in shame and replies, "Ren convinced me the master could save you from your sickness, but he was refusing to. We then fashioned some spears and confronted him, Ren insisting that if worse came to worse, we could force him into healing you. But master wouldn't do it. He wouldn't heal you no matter what. Said he wouldn't go against the will of the essence of life. That it wasn't his place to decide who lives and dies. But I refused to lose you." The father opens his eyes and looks upon the mother and continues, "I got so angry that I stabbed him with the spear. It just happened. I didn't even mean to do it. That's when he just disappeared. But before he did, he told me that he saw my future, and that forever I would be bound to my children, and that the woman I loved would become..." The father falls silent, and the mother, her face cold, asks, "What did he say I would become?" The father again shuts his eyes, but the mother reaches out, takes him by the hand, squeezes it, and with a hint of anger in her eyes, demands to know what he said. Finally, the father replies, "He said you would do something unspeakable, and that you would be forever cursed because of it, that you would become a bringer of chaos." The mother drops his hand, shakes her head, and the look of anger is replaced by fear as she says, "Why are you only telling me this now?" "Because I didn't believe him. Still don't. If he could see the future so clearly, how come he couldn't see Ren and I coming for him that night? How come he couldn't see his own death?" The mother gives a grim smile and says, "Maybe he did see it, but like you, he didn't want to believe." The father seems to have nothing to say to that, and that's when the mother asks, "How did you heal me then?" The father replies, "Ren did it. He was the one who actually healed you. He said with Master gone, the power of shadow and darkness had been unleashed, that it'd now be forever drawn to this place." The mother then shuts her eyes and mutters, "I was healed by the darkness." The father vehemently shakes his head to that, but doesn't seem to be able to find any words. The mother then says, "And yet, Master still speaks to our daughter. Maybe he still lives somehow. Maybe he is still with us." The father gives the faintest of smiles and replies, Yes, we must still have hope. We must believe in his teachings if we have any chance of stopping Ren and his knights, of preventing this dark future Master saw for us." The mother nods in agreement and places her hands over her stomach and says, "No matter what, he must not get this child." That's when the daughter suddenly speaks up and says, "We should hurry and get into the tower. Ren and my brother will be here soon." To that, the father sighs and starts to say how there's no way in, but his daughter's only response is to point, and where once had been solid rock, there is now a door. We then switch scenes and get a hazy vision, like something out of a dream, of Ben Solo standing upon an elevated platform, though he's no longer a young boy, but rather a man, and before him is what appears to be an endless sea of stormtroopers, officers, and other equipment like giant mechanical walkers, while in the blue sky above are dozens upon dozens of Star Destroyers and countless more TIE fighters flying in formation. And for a moment we listen as he talks about the might of the First Order, and how they have brought a lasting peace to the galaxy. That's when the scene shifts, and casually walking amongst the rows of stormtroopers, we see young Ben Solo, though none of the troopers seem to notice him. At his side walks the shadowy masked figure known as Ren, and to him we hear Ben say, This will all be mine?" Ren gives a single nod of the head and replies, "This is your destiny, to bring a lasting order to the galaxy for all." Ben seems skeptical and replies, "But I'm weak. I saw it when I took hold of my grandfather's lightsaber. I even saw my uncle trying to kill me." Ren replies, "Your uncle is the one who is weak, and his resolve is fading." Ben doesn't seem to understand and echoes the word resolve. Ren then continues, "To become a true master of the Force, one must first learn both the ways of the light and the dark. before fully embracing one or the other. Such was the way of things for your grandfather. This seems to confuse Ben, but before he can ask a question, Ren continues, From your uncle you will learn the ways of the light, and from another you will learn the ways of the dark. Ben glances all around him and asks, And then this will be my future. I'll rule the galaxy. We shall rule the galaxy, Ren corrects. Ben gives a slight frown and Ren continues, But you must see to it that your uncle trains you, for as I said, his resolve is fading. I don't understand, Ben counters, and Ren replies, Awaken, young one, and you will. That's when the scene shifts, and we watch as Ben's eyes open, and he finds himself in a forest at night, lying near a small fire, while on the opposite side of the fire, we see Luke and Mara Jade seated and talking quietly. Maybe we should finally move on, we hear Luke say as he turns slightly and glances at the massive stone tower behind them. He then continues, After all, we've been here for days and still can't find a way in. Mara then replies, Weren't you the one who said you felt a great disturbance in the forest when we got here, that you believed something was drawing you in? Luke gives a bit of a frown and replies, Come on, don't tell me you didn't feel it too. Mara glances at the tower, then shrugs. I'm not like you, Jedi. I'm not interested in what I can do for the Force. I'm only interested in what it can do for me. Luke gives a slight smile, almost as if he finds humor in that, and Mara immediately snaps back. Stop mistaking me saving your life as anything more than me realizing I may need you to get out of this place. Luke's smile grows, and he says, And when we do get out of here, what then? Is that when you're finally going to kill me? When I'm of no more use to you? Mara gives an angry look, like she wants to fire back, yes, but instead her expression softens and she says, When we get out of here, I'm fine with just letting you go your own way, while I go mine. Luke then says back, And what way is that? Where will you go? Back to the remnants of the Empire? Do you now plan on fighting to take back control from the New Republic? Is this war to never truly end? Will the conflict never cease? Mara then says back, All my Emperor ever wanted to do was to bring a lasting peace, to end conflict. Luke immediately says back, Yes, he wanted to end conflict by taking away choice. Mara gives a cold shrug. When left to their own devices, some will always choose the wrong path. Luke then gives Mara a rather long, sympathetic look before he says to her, Yes, some will make the wrong choice, but that does not mean they are lost forever. Mara laughs. Are you trying to save me, Master Jedi? Luke replies, If it is within my power to do so, yes, I would. Again Mara laughs, but the laughter quickly fades when she sees the true and earnest expression upon Luke's face. She then says, Why? Why save me? Why save me when you as a Jedi should seek to destroy me in my dark and selfish ways? Luke says back, Because I do not believe that is who you are. I believe that is only what the Emperor tried to make you, and if you had been left to choose, you would have picked another way. Mara, her expression darkening, says, You don't know who I really am, what I did in the service of the Emperor, the innocent lives I've taken. There is no forgiveness for the things I've done. Luke thinks a moment, then nods a bit and says, Perhaps not. Perhaps who you are now can never be forgiven. But Palpatine is long gone, and you again have the choice to become something else, someone better than this. Mara gives a rather spiteful smile and says, I would never be a Jedi. Luke quickly says back, And I would never ask you to become one. Mara gives a sarcastic grin and says, I was right about you, wasn't I? You have your doubts about the Jedi, don't you? Luke thinks for a moment, then says, I have my doubts, yes, but not in the Jedi, only in my ability to be one. Mara gives a brief laugh. If only the Jedi who fought in the Clone Wars had your humility. Luke doesn't know what to say to that, so Mara continues. You're already more of a Jedi than any of them ever were, Luke Skywalker. You didn't need to come halfway across the galaxy to find some lost Padawan to learn their ways. You are what they should have been. Again, Luke doesn't seem to know what to say. Finally, he responds, If I were a true Jedi, I'd be able to find a way into this tower. He then glances at it again, and this time, where there'd once only been stone, there is now a door, one that Luke and Mara just stare at for a long moment before Luke gets to his feet and quickly makes his way over to it. And while he's doing that, Mara looks at the seemingly sleeping Ben Solo, and that's when her face suddenly goes cold, and standing behind her is a wraith-like visage wearing a black mask with silver accents, and to her it quietly says, You have done well thus far, making sure they get here, and you have now given the Skywalker the confidence he needs to find his way into the tower. but within you I sense conflict. For the briefest of moments then, we focus on Ben's face and see that he is, of course, still awake and listening to what is being said, as he was listening to the conversation between Mara and Luke before them. The shadowy visage, who is of course Ren, then continues. Do not waver now, for one day, as promised, if you do this, you shall know true power. One day you shall be greater than any Sith has ever been. But betray me, or lure the Skywalker away from the path of the Jedi, away from training his nephew, and I will see to it that you are destroyed. The visage of Ren then disappears, and in the next instant we hear Luke calling out that the door is indeed real and he's found a way in. A few moments later, we see Ben pretending to wake up and rub the sleep from his eyes before stretching his arms over his head. All the while Mara just stares coldly at him before she finally shuts her eyes and lowers her head. We then switch scenes and find ourselves on the jungle planet where the long embrace between Sabine and Ezra has finally ended. And Ezra, who looks utterly worn out after his ordeal of being possessed by some remnant of Palpatine, says, "We have to hurry." Sabine, looking confused, says, Hurry where? What's going on here exactly?" Ezra shakes his head. "There's way too much to explain. We have to get to Mortis now." Ahsoka steps forward and says, "Luke and his nephew Ben, I believe they were teleported inside of Mortis." Ezra nods and replies, "Yeah, I know. That's why I went into the cave. That's why I tried to get into Mortis myself before it was too late. I didn't know he'd be able to pull them in like that." Sabine then says back, "Relax. I'm sure there's still time. They just got teleported in a few minutes ago. What could have happened in that time?" But Ahsoka shakes her head and says, "No. Time in Mortis works differently. What feels like a minute to us may have been days or even years for them. It's impossible to know." Sabine gives her a curious look and asks, "How do you know all that?" Ahsoka gives a grim smile and replies, "I've been there before a time or two, and in a way, I'm part of that place, and it is a part of me." Ahsoka then glances up into a nearby tree, where we see a very colorful convor, or bird-like creature, just sitting there perched. Ezra then says to her, "Which is why I need you. The tunnel, it's a gateway to Mortis, but there is darkness in there. Darkness that has been gathering for as long as beings have had knowledge of the Force. I was a fool to think I could get through without you." Ahsoka replies, "That's why you've been calling me here. You needed someone to get you in. This has never been about rescuing you, has it?" Ezra lowers his head almost shamefully. He glances at Sabine and nods before saying to her, "We each have our destinies. Mine has always been leading here." Sabine folds her arms angrily and is about to say something when Ahsoka puts a calming hand on her shoulder and says to Ezra, "What exactly is going on here? Why was it so vital that I bring Luke?" Ezra gives a slight shrug and simply replies, "He's a Skywalker, a chosen one of the Force. He's the only one that can put an end to all this, the only one who can restore the balance that was broken so long ago. And if he fails, the responsibility will fall upon the shoulders of his nephew." Ahsoka starts to tell Ezra that she doesn't understand, and Ezra replies, "Several years ago now, Ren found a way back into Mortis, through a tunnel much like the one here that was on the planet he was banished to oh so long ago. That's what brought about the birth of a Skywalker. That's why the father started to lose control of his children. Though the father had been there so long, he didn't understand what was truly happening anymore. He'd forgotten about Ren and his dark ambitions. The son then tried to corrupt Anakin Skywalker, to free him, and in the process, unknowingly break the bonds of Mortis to release her." Ahsoka gives Ezra a look that says she only partly understands what he's talking about, while Sabine looks on, utterly lost and confused. Ahsoka then looks like she's going to ask something, but Ezra says first, "Mortis is more than a gateway between the living and the cosmic force. It's a prison, the only place strong enough to contain her." Ahsoka, confused, shakes her head and asks who he's talking about. Ezra replies, "Haven't you ever wondered why there was only a father, son, and daughter on Mortis? Haven't you ever wondered what happened to the mother?" Ahsoka looks like she wants to ask more questions, but Ezra shakes his head and says there isn't time to explain any further, that they have to go now before it's too late. He then turns to Sabine and is about to say something, but before he can, she says first, "Don't even try to tell me to wait here while you two go into that cave. I'm coming whether you like it or not." Ezra smiles, nods, and says, "Glad to see you haven't changed one bit." And without another word, the three head towards the cave and enter it. And that is where this part ends. Well, that's all I've got for this time, and this is once again where I'd like to thank all the names you see on your screen who have been contributing their artwork throughout the course of this series, and to invite you to now tell me what you thought of this part, and what you think might happen next as we approach the finale. So leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.